I'm Gold Derby editor Daniel Montgomery here with Dr. Mehret Mandefro, an Emmy nominee for the nonfiction series American Masters. Specifically, you produced the documentary How It Feels to Be Free, about 6 groundbreaking Black women in the entertainment industry over the last century. What was the genesis of this film and what made you want to be involved in telling these stories?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I executive produced this film along some amazing women. This project began actually with the director, Yoruba Richin, who brought the project to me and my producing partner, Lacey Schwartz Delgado, 5 years ago now, actually over 5 years ago, if we're being honest. But Yoruba had just read the book, which was um, amazing, same title, How It Feels to Be Free, and thought it would make an amazing film. And when we read it, we felt the same, and so that's how the journey began.
And what stood out to you, the most about these women reading their stories?
What stood out to me is actually, I think I would argue all of us know a great deal about their music and the culture and the fashion and the films, but I didn't realize how really groundbreaking they were in terms of their careers in the entertainment industry and their work lives and the strategies they were employing, like in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, long before any of the same issues we've been talking about. So in many ways, we looked at this film as almost like the prehistory, if you will, to what's kind of going on now around representation and gender in the entertainment industry. So that was new, and I think that was what we found so exciting to portray and to tell.
And these women, having to fight against discrimination in their own careers, does it seem like it's almost inevitable for Black women in the position they were in to also be as politically engaged and aware as they were?
Yeah, I think the way I think of feminism, quite frankly, and Black feminism in particular, is they're kind of always on the leading edge because of all the realities that they're constantly navigating. Before we had a word for intersectionality, I think all Black women were living that reality, right? And so for those reasons, I think, yes, right? They were always kind of vanguard and really cultural innovators in terms of how you even begin to have a career at a time when you're not even supposed to have one, in many ways. So absolutely.
And was this always, when it was brought to you, was it always an American Masters project? What was it brought to American Masters at a certain point later, or what was that collaboration?
Yeah, early in this project, actually, American Masters gave us a very large development grant, the largest development grant to date, I think, on a project. And they invested in us because they got it from day one. So it was always going to be an American Masters project. And I think it falls kind of outside of what they usually do. But I think they believed a lot in Yoruba and the team that we had built around this film and what she was also trying to say. And so we're really grateful because in many ways, this film would not have happened without American Masters, especially, getting money early is always the hardest challenge in any project. So we're really grateful. They've been amazing partners throughout.
And what was that collaboration like with Yoruba, assembling the film? There's so much archive footage, so many people that you're interviewing, for the film. So what was that like?
Yeah, Yoruba's an amazing director to work with. She's so easy. She's so incredibly talented. And she always finds an into a story that I think is revelatory. It actually teaches you something new. And I think cinema at its best, that's kind of what it does, is that it helps you learn something you didn't even know you needed to know. And I think Yoruba is that kind of director. I've always been impressed with the stories she tells and her angles into them. So she's a director that Lacey and I would love to work with over and over again. And we already are on another project that I can't really talk about at this time, but she's an amazing voice. And so whatever we can do to throw our weight and help out with that, we do.
And also who worked on this film, Alicia Keys, multi
Yeah.
Grammy winner, her first Emmy nomination for this as well. And she's such an incredible musician in her own right. But of course, you see in the film, through these women's stories like Lena Horne and Diahann Carroll and all of these women, you can feel how their artistry kind of leads to Alicia Keys and makes her career more possible. What was her involvement and what was it like working with her?
Yeah, Alicia actually came into this project early too. We're really grateful for her support. It always helps when you're trying to tell these kinds of stories to have heavyweights and names that people recognize. So she's been a joy actually in many ways and very easy to work with. We obviously feature her prominently, but the way I think about all of these women in the film, in many ways, they kind of blaze this trail around the artist activist. And that's also how I think of Alicia and everything she's done with her career. So it made a lot of logical sense to us for her to be the EP on this, because in so many ways, those women, she stands on their shoulders like we all do, right? Like all artists do.
And as a Black woman in the industry, I imagine that all the issues addressed by this film are certainly things that are not new to you in your own personal experience. But having now read the book and then made this film, how do you reflect on where we are now, or where the industry is now, as opposed to where it came from? Like, how far is there left to go? There's definitely far to go, but we've come a long way. Like, how do you think of that now?
I'm optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic is how I would say it, right? There's always openings. And I think that there's been an opening. There's certainly more incoming work. It's kind of like, I feel like all of Hollywood discovered Black producers at the same time in many ways, right? But there's still a great deal to go. It's still harder for us to get money for our stories always, and that challenge will always be there. But then there's also groundbreaking companies like Macro doing everything that it's doing, what Charles King is doing there. I find very inspiring, and Ava DuVernay and her whole army around Array. So there's now, I think, a small but mighty tribe of people that are really kind of building the road and walking on it at the same time. But I think it's incumbent upon all of us to do the work and keep trying to figure out how this moment gets translated into real change that lasts, something that's actually sustainable and not just this moment,
Yeah, I definitely see that. Like in the film, it's so well presented, this idea of the gatekeepers and how they open the gates, and then after it's open a little bit, then it's closed again.
Exactly.
And because it reminds me, even in recent years, the year after 12 Years a Slave won Best Picture was the year of Oscars So White, right after that.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like a continuing process, and now being a producer and being one of those people who has access to the gate, who has the key, like what's that like to kind of open, to try to keep those doors open, not just for African Americans but also for Africa?
Yeah, I mean, this is a whole other interview for me. I'm deep in those waters, deep in those waters. I mean, I think it's really a responsibility for anyone who gets a certain amount of success and access to really think about who's coming behind. And I know that's something that we're all invested in. Yoruba, Lacey, myself, we all do a ton of mentoring. I do a lot of capacity building work in Africa with the Realness Institute and other projects. And so I just think it's a real responsibility, because not enough people did that, in my opinion, for us coming into this industry. And so I think that's actually how real change happens, right? It's not just the exec screenlighting things. It's also producers saying, you know what, we're going to work with each other and help mentor young producers, show them how to negotiate deals, help them get money, put my name as an EP on up and coming projects. I think without doing that, there's no way actually to make a change that lasts. So we are very invested and kind of committed to those kinds of programs. And shout out to all the programs that are already doing that, like Firelight and Black Star Film Festival, which runs its own set of mentoring and is also just a really important site, I think, for Black creators to know about. So I think that kind of work is actually what makes me feel really renewed and excited. And whenever I get tired, I really think about the young kids coming up, and it makes me feel very optimistic about the future.
And what do you hope that people take away from this film if they aren't as familiar with the history of Nina Simone, Abbey Lincoln, Pam Grier, Cicely Tyson, everyone you profile in the film, or if they're familiar with them but don't know everything that went into their lives and careers that motivated them?
I think that what I take away with is that, your circumstances, your time, your era does not have to define your artistry, right? That your artistry literally can create new pathways in the world, new realities that don't even exist. And yeah, I think that's what I would hope people take away with that. That's what I think when I think about these women. They all charted their own futures, long before those roads were there. And now we're walking on those roads, so we can do the same for others.
And you yourself have a unique background, as a medical doctor, and you got into the business making a documentary about your work around HIV/AIDS. And like, what was it like going from that, that such a different kind of career path to kind of learning the industry and making a path for yourself in there?
I know from the outside it looks like it's different, and I agree. I think a lot of my career had to do with letting go of expectations. But the funny, I guess, or the ironic thing now is I always tell people I stopped practicing medicine, in that you didn't have to be sick to talk to me anymore. I think the stories I tell often are actually have healing at the core of them, whether that's on a societal level or an individual level. So I think of it as like a continuum, between what I used to do and what I do now. You just don't have to be sick to talk to me, is what I say. So yeah, I think life is a journey. Stay open to it, right? It was undeniable how much I liked storytelling when it came into my life. And so I kept doing it. And I will continue to do it. I think it's such an important skill, but also film is such an important medium for the current era, because our reality is really sick on multiple levels, and it's going to take a bunch of us telling stories from all kinds of perspectives to heal the world. So I'm firmly planted in this discipline now, and quite thrilled for it.
One of the another thing that I took away from this film watching it is, hearing Cicely Tyson talk about Sounder and people getting to know a Black woman and a Black family in a way that if they didn't know anyone who was Black, they wouldn't have had access to. And it just reminded me of, I think it was Roger Ebert who described film as like an empathy machine. And it's sort of, it's like you said, people don't need to be sick to talk to you anymore, but like even in film, you're talking to so many people.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a way to get to know and get to see other people's humanity at scale. Like,
Yeah.
instead of one-on-one, it's one on everyone can see this element of humanity. How much does that mean to you?
I mean, 1,000% I agree with you. And I think that's also why I find it's really a responsibility when you're telling these stories, to tell them as authentically and as fully as possible, both the bad and the good and the messy of it. And that's why I think it's so important to also have Black people behind the camera, right? And that we're not just talking about representation in front of the camera. Until we write those stories and portray those realities, I don't think people will understand the fullness of Black humanity. And so I think it's incredibly important. And in our modern age, everything is like sold through a story now. It amazes me. There's like every corporation has an in-house like production unit now. And I just feel like that's actually, people have stopped reading, unfortunately. It's like the way that people communicate are actually through these stories. So all of these issues, even more so, right? Even more so now.
And being nominated for an Emmy now, American Masters has been around for many years. It has a long storied history. What would it mean to you to, if you won this Emmy for a nonfiction series?
Yeah, in all honesty, the company we are among in terms of our category it's amazing to even just get here, especially considering how long it took us. So it would be huge. It would be a large example, I think, that all kinds of stories need to be told and supported. And I think I think it would mean a lot for people to know that truly independent makers like us that came to a certain degree from outside of the industry now have a seat at the table. And I think from that perspective, it would be monumental. But honestly, we're thrilled to be even nominated. We're even honored in that regard.
Well, I want to congratulate you on this film, on this nomination, on all of your work currently and going forward. Hopefully this nomination, if nothing else, also is another little thing, keeping those gates open a little bit for people. So thank you for all your work, and thank you for talking with me about it today.
Thank you. And I just want to shout out our amazing, amazing Canadian partners, Yap Films, Elizabeth Trojan, and Elliot Halpern, because we would not been able to finish this film without them. So shout out to Yap Films for helping us.
Absolutely. And thank you again.
All right. Take care.